Hey everyone, and welcome to Smooches and Stabs. We've got a doozy of a story today. It is going to challenge every part of Pepper's
It
romantic
is.
and whimsical genius.
I cannot find romantic or whimsical genius within this story. Okay, so you guys just wait. Next time, I'm going to have to pull out all the stops.
I think next time, granted, you did suggest this. However, once it came out of your mouth as an option to discuss, there was no going back.
Right, I know.
So,
I sent Jaime all of these ideas. Like I'll pop these ideas on Facebook Messenger and say, okay, well, this hasn't been solved. Okay, well, this hasn't been solved. She latched on to this story idea like breath.
this is my Alice in Wonderland story. This is my fall down a rabbit hole. In fact, now I'm convinced I'm going to go to the library and get just about every book written on this topic. And I'm not the only one, because this topic has been discussed since 1947, and it has been really drugged through the muck.
All kinds of fiction books written on it.
All kinds
of, yeah.
But I'm sure that no one ever in history has looked at this case the way that Pepper Basham and Jaime Jo Wright have.
Oh, yeah. Well,
but I think I do owe you a romantic story that I have to somehow make sorted, because you're going to have to work really, really hard to make this one even whimsical.
Yeah, I know. And your job is easier in making things dark and,
well, you just
twisted.
Kill off the love interest. It's pretty simple.
I know. Or plant creepy or plant creepy, spooky people creeping around.
Right. I don't know. Well, all you have to do is make kiss. Guns. That should be pretty easy for romance. Right?
Yeah. It seems like Elizabeth Short. It seems like she did a whole lot of kissing. I do believe from what we know.
I think she did. So if people aren't aware of who Elizabeth Short is, which we are now introducing the character by name, she is better known by a beautiful nickname that completely thrills every ounce of my being.
If you can't see right now, I'm hanging my head. If you're not watching
watching the YouTube video and you're listening to this on a podcast player, Pepper is hanging her head, not in shame, but in dismay that I'm so deliciously intrigued by the Black Dahlia.
Okay. Give us a little bit of background, Jaime.
Okay. So first of all, a dahlia, for example, is not exactly the flower that I would have picked, because a dahlia is like, it's kind of a bushy, and it's not delicate. And this woman was actually quite delicate. But anyway, for some reason, they called her the Black Dahlia. She was better known by the people in her time, and while she was alive, as Elizabeth Short. She was not called the Black Dahlia until they found her body. Her body.
I think the Blue Dahlia was another murder. That was similar, and they took that because they found her dressed in black or something like that, and then switched it that way.
Blue Dahlia murder. Oh, now I have to go down that rabbit trail. Oh
dear.
Interesting. All right, I won't do that on the podcast. Okay, so Elizabeth Short was born in 1924, and she was born in Boston, Massachusetts. I kind of wonder if she had that Boston Mass accent. She was an actress, so she probably knew how to change her voice. But anyway, she was born to Cleo and Phoebe May Short. She was the third of 5 daughters, and at a really young age, she was really interested in the cinema, and she decided pretty much by the time she was in her teens that she was going to become an actress.
Yep.
And so she moved out by herself to LA by the mid 40s. So she had to have been in her early 20s? Not even?
Yep. They said when she was, let's see, in December when she was 18, she relocated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and she spent literally probably about 3.5 years in LA before her own personal hell broke loose. She was trying to catch a big break in Hollywood, which she never did. And she worked as a waitress. And she got involved with a lot of people. I would say what I've read about her is her personality was definitely not timid, shy, demure. How would you describe her, Pepper?
Just from what I've read, it seems that she, if I'm going on a romantic bent here, it seems
Yes.
that she could dazzle the gentleman
Mhm.
and was very alluring, maybe not in a way where she was trying to seek favors, but
Right.
she seemed to like guy attention. She
Mhm.
seemed to know how to do that part of being an actress or a woman in Los Angeles, if that's what she was hoping for.
Right.
She had a lot of guy friends that knew her. Let's just say that when they were doing the investigation, there were a whole bunch of guys on that list that they
Yeah.
had to go through. So
Yeah.
there
How-
was quite a number.
But she sort of had a interesting fact in that while she attracted male attention and potentially even tried to garner it to a degree. If you find a picture of her online, she's absolutely gorgeous. She's got a little bit of Liz Taylor going. And
the problem is that the picture that pops up when you type in her name is her mugshot, which automatically makes you go,
well, this is true. This is true. But I'm actually looking at one, which is, I think it must be her headshot for her acting. And it's definitely giving off Liz Taylor vibes. But okay, so this reputation with the men only went so far because she really wasn't a loose woman, as they might have called her at the time. She had her moral standards and she would flirt to a point. And I think she probably did that to get attention because it was LA. And if you're going to be charming, you have to have a little bit of, seductress. It's 1940s.
Yeah.
Glam.
And if you're going to be in the movies, you want to, if you are being, if you're being around people who possibly are going to be famous, then you definitely want to be remembered.
Right.
I off topic real quick. When I was taking a class with Jim Rupert, an author, Jim Rupert, he was talking about how as authors you want to stand out now, because that makes, if you're meeting with agents or editors or whoever, they makes it memorable. So in this kind of, I would assume in the acting world, that's the same kind of thing.
Oh, for sure. And even more so, you have to be able to, as a writer, we have to, for the most part, stand out on the page and maybe have a few things in personality that can be memorable. But as an actress, it's all in your demeanor, your facial expressions, your vocal abilities,
what you look like.
Okay. So she was known for really doing one bad thing that earned her a mugshot, which is kind of funny to me today because I'm thinking of how often this happens now and nobody gets mugshots for them. But she was arrested for underage drinking.
Yep.
Which was a really big deal back then. I mean, that was probably her mother's first sign that her daughter was going south.
Yep. And that wasn't too far. Actually, though, quite a few years before the incident we're going to discuss. Yes. Because the mugshot was 1943 and the incident was 1947. That's 4 years. So
right. So let's talk about the incident, because really we can talk a lot about Elizabeth Short, and there's a good podcast that semi-dramatizes her story called Unsolved Murders. You can find the Black Dahlia story there, and you'll learn a lot about her background that brings her to the point of LA. But for the sake of this podcast and how we would rewrite history, we need to get to the crux of the matter, which is,
let me just say, I will not be one of those people looking up that podcast, just so you guys know.
I will throw the links of the podcast onto our Facebook page, Smooches and Stabs, for anybody who does
if you
want to delve into the deep, dark secrets of the Black Dahlia. However, so it was 10 o'clock in the morning on January 15th in 1947, and a woman named Betty Bersinger, she was a local housewife, was taking a walk down Norton Avenue, and she saw what she thought was a mannequin. And because the body was so white, the skin was so pale, it didn't look real. And this is the gruesome part. It was in pieces. So that's, I think, where she probably first got her idea that this can't be a human. This has to be a mannequin. Right. The body was actually severed, split in half at the waist, and some other elements had been done to her body. For the squeamish, we won't go into those. But she was really mutilated. But the creepy thing about this whole thing is modern day forensics right away would have known something. First glance, this is not the crime scene, because there was no blood.
No blood. Yep.
No blood.
Right.
So they identified her by her fingerprints, and they did an autopsy. And
interesting too that she had been washed in gasoline. Her body had been washed in gasoline, so all fingerprints from outside of her body would have not been found, because her body had been washed with gasoline.
Right. And of course, back in 1947, there was no such thing as DNA. So they wouldn't have swabbed her. They wouldn't have done any of that. Maybe they would have had the idea of checking under her fingernails. But even if they had found, that she'd fought back, it probably wouldn't have told them much, unless there was, identifying clothing that ripped or something. Yeah. She, her official cause of death was cerebral hemorrhage and shock. It says she had been bound and unfortunately tortured before her death. So a very violent death, which we won't focus on, because
you could listen to the podcast Jaime referred earlier.
I will look up the actual medical exam reports. That's what I will do. And I will be disappointed, because back then they also didn't publish the pictures of the corpses, because I like to look and see if I can figure out something for myself. I'm in the wrong career. I probably shouldn't have been a crime writer. I should have actually gone into criminal science. Anyway, moving on. So she's dead. This woman finds her. They call the police. They send out a bulletin, and they're hoping that some details about this woman named Elizabeth Short will be uncovered. She was last seen. I'm trying to remember here. Oops, that's the wrong page.
Oh, she was last seen with a married man.
Yes. Thank you.
Robert Red Manley, a 25-year-old married salesman, Elizabeth, had been dating. So we have already, boom, what's going on there?
Right.
Can that be my romantic part?
Go for it. So let's give a few more details, and then we'll go into what we really think happened. Okay. So in short, the crux of this whole thing is nobody knows for sure who killed her. There are a lot of theories out there. There were even people who stepped forward and confessed for whatever reason. I'm not sure why I would do that if I hadn't really killed her. And perhaps one of them was the authentic murderer, but that was never enough evidence. And their stories didn't match the timelines that were established.
And the curious thing are the letters that came after her death. There was somebody who posted, they would cut out letters to make the message, and they sent it into the police department and said, I'm the murderer. I'm going to turn myself in, but I want you to search for me a little bit more.
Right.
And then, so there was somebody. So then they found clothes by the shore and had a letter in it that confessed to the murder and said, basically, I've killed myself because I can't handle this anymore.
Right.
But the very next week, a new letter showed up that had the cutout letters saying that you haven't found me yet.
Right.
I'm waiting for you to find me. So what is
there was lots of taunting
on?
There was a little bit of what's the killer's name?
Zodiac? No.
Thanks. Yes, the Zodiac killer who would taunt the police.
Okay.
But also the BTK killer wrote like riddles, basically. It must be a serial killer thing. Anyway.
But stop right there. You just said it must be a serial killer thing. Boom, boom. This is just one murder, Jaime. What are you talking about?
Maybe. Or could there be more to the story? See,
I'm curious.
I'm thinking, okay, I'm thinking a lot of thoughts right now. I've been on the FBI website, which I will also link to our Smooches and Stabs page, because you can actually go on and read actual documents from 1947. And it is a rabbit hole, and I'm falling into it. And I probably will not come out for a couple of years, but
You guys can see a book in your future, just saying.
there is so much information, and there's also the original news article from the Daily Police Bulletin. Who knew back then that they issued daily police bulletins? First of all,
Wow.
I want them. Can we bring that back? Okay. Wanted information on Elizabeth Short between the dates of January 9th and 15th, 1947. So they were trying to piece together what her life was during that time, because she had last been seen with a married man, and there were a bunch of men associated with her, although she was also, again, not known for loose living.
And she'd only been dead about 10 hours when her body was found. So she hadn't died the 9th or 10th or 11th. So it had to have been either the night of the 14th. It had to have been the night of the 14th. So where was she and what was happening between January 9th and January 14th?
Right. And so this is the last. Okay. So in the police bulletin, I am going to read this because I think this will inspire our creative juices. Just sounds so wrong when you're talking
I know
about
it
murder,
does.
our creative genius. Okay.
Yeah.
They give a description of her, which I find interesting when I know some of the details of her, because really she was not a large woman. So she probably would have been fairly easy to subdue. She was 22 years old. She was 5'6", and she was only 118 pounds. So she was very small boned. She had black hair, green eyes. They describe her as very attractive. Interestingly, they note she had bad lower teeth. And then her fingernails were chewed to the quick. Which I find interesting only because if you go with the theory that she was held for a few days before she was killed, my question is, what were her fingernails like before? Was she,
do we have any pictures?
Did she have a bad habit of chewing her fingernails?
Right.
I have a bad habit of that. But if she's looking at glam in Hollywood, you'd think she'd have finely manicured hands, especially being a waitress. So it makes you wonder if she chewed her fingernails to the quick in the last 2 or 3 days of her life while she's wondering if she's going to live.
So question then would be, can you make your bottom teeth bad from chewing your fingernails for a short period of time? Because I know you can from chewing your fingernails for a long period of time, but can you do the same thing from a short period of time?
I don't know. And they don't explain what they mean by bad lower teeth, because part of me was wondering, like, was she punched in the face or something?
Were they crooked?
She was last seen on January 9th when she got out of a car at the Biltmore Hotel. At that time, this is so glam. I love it. Sorry. And then she's walking to her death. It's like Humphrey Bogart all over this. She was wearing a black suit, no collar on coat, probably cardigan style, a white fluffy blouse, black suede high-heeled shoes, nylon stockings, white gloves. The elegance. Full-length beige coat, carried a black plastic handbag, 12 by 8 inches, in which she had a black address book. She readily makes friends with both sexes and frequented cocktail bars and night spots. On leaving the car. Yeah.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
On leaving the car, she went into the lobby of the Biltmore and was last seen there. And
so she was on her way to meet her sister, right? Mm-hmm. Who was visiting from Boston. Did she ever meet her sister?
I don't believe she did.
It doesn't say anything that I've been able to find that the last thing that they asked it doesn't say anything about having met her sister. The last time she was seen was on the phone in the Biltmore Hotel's lobby.
Well, what's interesting though too is, so she died on January 15th. So about 9 days later, the Los Angeles Examiner was sent a suspicious manila envelope. Okay. And this is the one that I think might have some credibility to her case, because there was a lot of stuff that came through. But this one used cutout words from the newspaper that says, "Here's Dahlia's belongings." And inside was her birth certificate, business cards, photographs, names written on pieces of paper, and an address book. And all of the contents had been cleaned with gasoline, which is exactly what had been happened to her body. And so the authorities believed it probably was from her killer. The other thing that came out of the autopsy was the way her body was dismembered and so clean. They believed that whoever did it had probably medical experience.
Yeah, because the cut was at such a place on her spine that it could make it through the spine easily.
Which isn't
also that her body was drained of blood was the other
Right.
thing. Now, of course, she could have bled out wherever they had her. So
that's still a lot of blood to bleed out.
yeah,
Granted,
So-
if the corpse is severed in half,
you probably bleed pretty quickly.
yeah, probably. But, it's just interesting to me all the way around. Okay. So the only other thing I'll mention is this little detail, and then we can start really, really thinking about it. But in 2003, okay, this is where it gets
Lots of
interesting.
years later. Yeah.
Lots of years later, in 2003, an LA homicide detective
Yep.
named Steve Hodel, if I'm pronouncing that right, found several pictures of the Black Dahlia. Now, get this. It's so funny to me that he happens to be a homicide detective. And then he finds pictures of Elizabeth Short among papers left by his late father, George, who was a former surgeon.
Yes.
And on
Yes.
further investigation, I'm reading this off of IMDb if anybody wants to know. On further investigation, Steve discovered that his father had also been a prime suspect in her murder, and obviously hadn't gone around telling his son about that. And then his son goes to become a homicide detective. Can you imagine? Can you imagine if George really was the killer?
And you find that out about your dad?
Right. And it did come to light. This is where Elizabeth Short begins to shed her innocent persona. Okay. It did come to light that he was a surgeon, George Hodel, and he had been carrying on with an affair with her. So they did know each other. And after the police questioned him, he actually moved to the Philippines and he never came back.
And he didn't live in the States very often. Right.
But now his own son, homicide detective, believes his father was actually a serial killer, dun, 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 who murdered at least a dozen women, including her, and then fled the country because he was tipped off that he was a suspect in her murder by corrupt police with whom he was running an illegal abortion practice. Can we get any more conspiracy? I mean, we haven't even started.
You don't have to make stuff up for this.
No, we're just literally talking.
This is even made up.
No, right.
You're reading the facts. Yes.
Right. Exactly. And really there's all kinds of funny things too. Somebody suggested that Orson Welles was the killer, the filmmaker.
Actually, I get onto that.
I'm not sure how that one
Time traveling Orson Welles.
But the last detail that to me is perhaps the epitome of the depravity of man is to monopolize on her death. The Biltmore Hotel added a cocktail to its menu that they titled the Black Dahlia. Not classy. I'm sorry.
No, and I think if you guys listen to the podcast or do more research on your own about this, you'll find so many horribly corrupt things that human nature. I mean, the newspaper people called the mom and they just strung her on, and it was awful to get information from the mom. There was missing there were fingerprints that had been tampered with that never made it to the police department so that they could be reviewed. There were lots of really weird things that make you think I think there was more than one person involved in this.
And there might have been one killer, but definitely assisted in a cover up.
Well, okay, if she was on her way to meet her sister and her sister never let anybody know she never showed up, I'm wondering if her sister's involved.
Okay, so here's where your and my roles become concerning, because you're getting very devious, and my thought just went to a love triangle.
We are rubbing off on each other. Well, actually, I was thinking of a love triangle too. Her
Because
sister,
yeah, okay, so Elizabeth Short, it did come out, was having an affair with George Hodel, who, by the
Right.
way, is not extremely good looking, and I really question why.
yes,
But whatever.
agreed.
And then if she was going to see her sister, what if he had seduced both women? I don't know how
Yes.
long her sister was around. And what if he actually fell in love, like had some sort of psychopathic ability to feel something for the sister, preferred her maybe, and Elizabeth got in the way?
Yes, or he had felt something for Elizabeth, and the sister got angry enough to threaten him, and they made a pact to do the deed together.
But see, here's something that I'm thinking of. This is the one thing that doesn't line up for me. If you're a surgeon and you take care of a body using knives, then you want to clean the body. Why gasoline?
Was that like something that would have been you could buy in large quantity? I mean, doing alcohol would have been really hard to use in large quantity to clean a whole body.
It would, but you'd think he would have access to a lot of different types of chemicals that would be more medically
But
inclined.
gasoline would be less suspicious.
That is
right?
true. That is true.
If you're getting large quantities of rubbing alcohol or large quantities of something, some other disinfectant cleaner thing, which I don't know what there would be, but if you are, I'm sure you know, Jamie, but if you are trying to get larger quantities of that, then it would make you maybe look suspicious if people are like, why are you needing 2 gallons of
Well,
rubbing
yeah,
alcohol?
that is true. That is true.
And what was
I
where
did
was
just
his sister?
confession momentarily, side note, I did just Google gasoline cleaning dead bodies.
Yes, awesome. And what did you find?
I'm looking, so keep talking. What about the sister?
Okay. I'm curious. I mean, there's nothing in any of the information I was able to locate, and you have the documents up there, so you may know better. There's nothing in the information about what happened to the sister. No, nothing about her ever telling anybody her sister didn't show up to meet her, which to me seems super odd since her sister's visiting from Boston. So you would think that if you were going to be visiting from that far away and your sister didn't show up to meet you, then somebody's going to say something about that. And she never showed up to meet her sister. Yeah. Right there was the red flag for me that made me wonder, okay, is sister somehow involved? Is she involved with what's his name again?
George Hodel.
Steve George Hodel. Is she involved with him? What's even going on with the 25-year-old guy who was married that she came back with a few days before? You know, what happened with him?
Yeah, you know, there's so many questions. There's so many questions. In fact,
maybe they're Spaniards. Is George Hodel a Spaniard, which would help us go back to the fact that they can't be trusted, because aren't they like alien extraterrestrials anyway?
Did we really just go there?
Sorry. I feel compelled.
We have to bring in the extraterrestrials, but you know, here's an interesting thought. Sorry, I was I was Googling, and remember how we mentioned serial killer and the killer wrote in giving the information and kind of act like the Zodiac killer? Guess what I just found?
What?
Steve, Mr. Homicide Detective, son of said George Hodel, also believes his father is the Zodiac killer.
Okay. So what would be really interesting would be to go to medical and police records in the Philippines to see if there aren't similar female pieces murders.
You know, it really would be interesting, but the Zodiac killer, I mean, his were not terribly much of a stretch from what he did to the Black Dahlia. And Stephen Hodel, the son, says he wanted to follow the evidence and kind of disprove his father. And instead, he found a lot of, in his words, damning evidence. He thinks his dad brutally murdered and mutilated Elizabeth Short on January 15th, and then drove 6 miles to the vacant lot where Short's body was discovered. His father had a house called the Franklin House. And he thinks that's why he did the murder, was because his mother and brothers were gone at the time. And so he had the house to himself. And
but also, wasn't there a room in a hotel close to the vacant lot that was discovered to have been blood was everywhere the next morning, and they don't know the guy that checked into the room wasn't the same name. They couldn't find the name of the guy. They couldn't find the guy who checked into the room.
Yeah, there's all kinds of
name.
There's all kinds of weird details. And really, when you look at this mystery, it gets deeper and deeper and more. I would be interested in hearing Stephen Hodel lay out what he believes is the evidence for his father's case, because there's so much on Google. It's kind of a mishmash. And part of me wonders what is true, even versus what's conspiracy theorists out there that are just mishmashing facts together as to what happened. But there's things like that that you hear about. And there's, oh gosh, I mean, I'm just looking through all these records. Regardless, here's my take on it. Here's what I think happened. If I was going to rewrite the Black Dahlia story and put it in a fiction novel, I would say this. She was working as a waitress. Her sister had come into town. She was off to meet her sister. She got sidetracked by a flirtation with a married man that she knew, probably had a few drinks, because that's what you do at nightclubs and cocktail bars. And then I think she stopped off at George Hodel's house because she was a little tipsy, and it would make sense that you would go to the house of the man that you were having an affair with for assistance to either get home or get a hold of her sister and let her know that she's running late, or whatever the story may be. So I think she went and, for the most part, subjected herself to the danger. The question is, in my brain, did she have any inclination, or was she so besotted with this man that she completely missed all the signs? Or was it random? Was it not him at all?
Was it not him at all? Or yes, or was it not him at all? Although there's a whole lot of evidence that makes you think that. And the other question, if we're going to go conspiracy here, was her sister involved? Was there the lure? Was the sister used as the lure? Was the sister used as, was she an accomplice? Was she jealous of her sister's desire to go to Hollywood and live on her own at such a young age, and she was like, no? Or had Elizabeth gone to George Hodel's house to say, I met somebody else, we've got to end this, and that's when he lost it.
That could be. Gosh, there's just so much in this story that, I mean, they've made movies, they've written fiction novels. We're not the first people to talk about it. No. I really want to challenge you, because I don't think there's a lot more I can do with her story to make it worse than it already is. So how would you redeem her story?
Ooh, you asking the readers or me?
I'm asking you're the happy kissy face,
how would I redeem
fuzzy writer?
Well, I don't think there's a happy ending to her story just because she's cut in half and left for, wherever. I think the part that could be made sweet is that George Hodel was truly in love with her, and not the guy who killed her. And what became so obsessed with trying to find her killer that he collected all the information he could to try to solve it on his own, because he was so devastated.
And maybe that's why he had pictures and such.
But see, why I think the sister's involved is that even though we have no clue to that at all, birth certificate?
Well, see, yeah.
How
But
cares
was
about
she
a birth
carrying it?
certificate? Right?
Was there a reason to
And
be carrying it in your purse in 1947? Did she
and
need
she
it for a
had
form of
that little,
identification?
she had this little black purse that couldn't have been super huge. And all of these things were in it that were high interest things. Well, that little, she had some little book that she had names
Right.
in of people that
Right.
she had met.
Can I
She
just say,
had,
if I was the killer, I would not have turned those items in, not because I was afraid of being found, but those are like the best souvenirs.
well, I wouldn't know because I have no imagination to kill people. Well, that's not true. I do write deaths, but not like you do. And so, but if you're all for here, I'll try to find you a book that's similar and send it to you for fun.
Oh, that would be great.
But I mean, if I were going to redeem that situation,
Yeah.
I would say he was so distraught that he tried to solve it on his own. All things point to somebody who was very twisted, who, if any of the notes that were sent were valid from the killer, except that first one that had all the identification stuff in it, which feels
Right.
pretty valid.
Right.
This was not a first-time murderer.
No.
You don't do stuff like
No,
that.
it wasn't.
It was somebody who had very meticulously planned what they were going to do and how it was going to happen, to still to be such a mystery. And so
Right.
that would be my redeeming part. My redeeming part would be that he was so distraught that he, began looking for ways to solve it on his own, even though he was a part of a corrupt police department, friends with the corrupt policeman.
Well,
Yes.
and the whole idea. Okay, here's my other question. What if her reason for going to George Hodel, and if he was the killer, let's go with the fact that he's the killer, she was having an affair with him, and he was also involved in an illegal underground abortion ring. What if she had gone to him for completely different reasons?
Mm-hmm. Or knew about his and was going to out him,
right,
and all the other corrupt people involved. That would be
True.
a great reason to kill somebody.
It's true. This is
Maybe
true.
she discovered it. Maybe she discovered it between the last time they saw her. Maybe her sister had care for an abortion, so it would be away from home and no one would notice it, right? No one would know she had been pregnant. So she's away from home, and her sister had come there, and Elizabeth finds out all the stuff, or her sister finds out all this stuff and says, "Oh my goodness," or whatever.
Right.
And because she traveled all the way from Boston to California in 1947, that's a long ways to go. And
why did she? I need to look up more about this sister.
I'm getting curious about her myself.
I think we're getting curious about her. The other thing I am going to mention, to throw a wrench into all of this, is another suspect who a lot of cops thought was at the very least an accomplice, was a man by the name of Leslie Dillon. Leslie Dillon. He was a bellhop. He was a writer, and he was a mortician's assistant. And he knew a lot of details about Short's murder when
blood draining.
Yep. When the police called him in for questioning, he knew a lot of details, and he was let go thanks to a dirty cop.
Oh, see, that's why I am still convinced it was more than one person involved in this.
Well, and according to this article that I'm looking at, you are not alone.
But okay, but it would make sense then. If we have corrupt cops, we have illegal abortion, whatever. What is it called? Illegal abortion
ring.
Sure. And then we have a former surgeon or current surgeon at the time. We have all these things happening. I mean, it's perfect. It sets up perfectly for it to be more than one person, so everything can be covered up so well.
Right.
That's why it's still a mystery today.
Or we could go back to our original season 1, episode 1 theory. And Edgar Allan Poe time traveled.
We could go back to there.
Because I mean, he was Jack the Ripper. He might as well be Black Dahlia's killer.
I know, right? And popped in. But why her? Why not her? I guess.
Well, you know, Jane had kind of given him the lurch back in 1830.
Now, let me just say though, that Jack the Ripper, who was also Edgar Allan Poe, only went after prostitutes, and Elizabeth was not one of those.
But she was having an affair.
She was, and if he had time hopped and saw her dressed in her little black stuff, he might have thought she was a loose woman.
And she acted like one. Remember, we talked about that. She sort of acted flirty, even though she wasn't known for sleeping around. And
even though she was dating a married man, both of them were married men.
It's George so weird to me. Like, she's marked as an innocent, really. When you read about her, she's really given this innocent persona. And for the most part, she kind of is, outside of the fact that she was a tease.
Yeah. And sleeping with guys who were married.
Was she sleeping with him? The married man?
Well, George was married.
Was he?
You said he had a house.
Yeah, see, I'm getting everybody confused now. Well, George, his brothers lived there.
George was married, and so was the guy. The last guy she was with was a married man, but it doesn't say, it didn't say they slept together, but can I just say she had traveled with him to another city and stayed with him. So there would be questions about whether there was something more physical involved than just a travel buddy.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. George Hodel scored higher on an IQ test than Albert Einstein.
Okay.
Yes.
He's the same.
I mean, he is. He's got to be. There is, if you're interested, there's a TNT miniseries called I Am the Night. It stars Chris Pine. I have yet to watch it, but I think it's moving up on my to be watched list. And this is
creepy.
I don't know. I haven't seen it, but it's from TNT. So it's definitely not going to be filtered for, primetime TV. And it does take the twist that we're assuming George was the killer. So if you want to watch a movie based off of that theory, that would be an interesting one. There's other movies out there that have been made, but this one kind of intrigues me. You're right, Pepper. There's not a lot we can do to redeem this story, unfortunately, as we come to the end of our podcast.
But I found a good story to end with.
Okay. Take us out with joy.
A good historical fact.
What is a good historical fact?
Now, before we go there, we really are curious how you guys would find redemption in this story. I'm all for happy endings. Please redeem the story somehow, because it's not one of those that is easy to redeem. And so we want to hear from you. Only give good ones. Only do happy ending ones, unless you really want to impress Jamie. If you want to impress Jamie, go down the dark hole.
Hey, can we just put it out there that the killer has done all that needs to be done to, quote, impress me, unquote.
That IQ test thing. Woo.
Right.
Woo.
Right.
Okay. I'm going to have help here with pronouncing names. One of our listeners shared this story on a private message, Smooches and Stabs, to tell us this historical fact.
Yes.
The true Beauty and the Beast story. There was a boy named Petrus Gonzalez, and he never wanted to be called a beast, but he had that strange disorder where hair grows all over your body. He was shipped from his home in Spain to be a court jester in France because of this. So he got France, was considered a monster, so they made him into a jester so it wouldn't be so bad. People awaited the reputed man of the woods to bare his teeth and reveal his savage side, but that day never came. Gonsalves, even killed temperament, persisted. So he was this good guy. So he wasn't beastly in behavior, only in fur coverage.
Mhm.
Today we know that this man was no beast. He was just a kid who had hypertrichosis, which is a
Right.
disease that results in hair growing all over a person's body. Now, at the time this happened, he, let me see, I'm trying to find the part where he meets, where he meets his love interest and they get married and they have all these kids.
Well, that's a hairy situation.
So the king of Spain, no, he was sent to France, wasn't he? The king of France, Henry II, King Henry II's wife, Catherine how do you say her name? Medici?
Medici?
Went into matchmaking. Medici, thank you. Went into matchmaking mode to find this kid a wife. And so she kept Gonsalves's condition a secret, and she would look for a woman for him. And she would say, I'm looking to find a wife for this friend of mine or this young man of mine. And on a woman whose name was Catherine. It's rumored that at first this arranged marriage was a bitter pill for the young beauty to swallow. Clearly, Catherine hadn't been expecting a nobleman in a hairy wolf's package. Yet, in a series of events straight out of Beauty and the Beast, Catherine was eventually won over by the beast's personality.
Aww.
We don't know what happened. We don't know what happened after the wedding in Beauty and the Beast, but we do know what happened to Catherine and Pedro Gonsalves. The pair was married for 40 years and they produced 7 children, 3 of whom were born with hypertrichosis, the same condition of their father. Sadly, Europe's traveling sideshow fever snatched those 3 children up and sent them as gifts to royal families, a fate that mimicked Gonsalves's own. So the girls, however, were well respected and highly educated. The brothers were ones who have the hypertrichosis. So they were married for 40 years, and it ended up being a love match after initial shock wore off.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting story. I think it definitely does give some redemption to this podcast. a little bit of fairy tale.
Yeah, I needed the fairy tale at the end of that. And also as a teaser, I think we will be talking about a ghost ship next time, which may bring back the whole controversy of Atlantis from my point of view. So I'm thinking we'll go a little lighter.
The fact of the matter is, we are going to become known by 2 things, Pepper. You, the connoisseur of Atlantis, and me, infatuated with the Black Dahlia.
And Edgar Allan Poe.
Oh, yes. They should have gotten married.
Oh, by the way, listeners, those of you who are listening will be able to see this. If you're watching on YouTube, I have something I'm sending to Jaime.
Oh boy.
Just because I love her so much, even if she's creepy. Look at that.
No. That is so cool.
The little magnet.
I love it.
Where
did you get those?
I got them off Etsy.
That's the best.
They're the cutest. Look, there's Austin.
Oh my gosh.
I'm thinking of throwing Byron away just because the whole idea of having him with his clothes on and knowing what he was really like makes me want to
don't throw him away. I mean, keep him as an object lesson of what not to do with your life. Oh my gosh.
Shelley.
I love
Shakespeare
it.
Stoker, Bram Stoker's on here.
So this is an advertisement for an Etsy shop then.
I know.
Great. I love it. And 2 more
I'll share where I got it from. I'll add a link to our website, to our Facebook page so you guys can see it.
Perfect. Yep. Share a link there. And everybody else who is listening, go out and buy Pepper's latest release, Mistletoe Countess. You're going to want to read it. It's adorable. And everything that I ever traumatized you with today in this story will be erased from your mind because there are some massive kissing going on in this book. And if you need that to forget that Jaime Jo ever brought up the name of the Black Dahlia, you need to get the Mistletoe Countess. It's
Hey,
published by,
mistletoe is in the title. You have to expect some kissing going on.
well, I thought maybe one kiss, but
One kiss.
475. That's like
Yes.
nauseating.
Yes.
I'm learning all sorts of new things about the art of kissing in books.
Ooh.
I might have to work a kiss in one of mine right before they die or something. So
You guys would appreciate this too. Speaking of the difference between me and Jamie and how sometimes I think we're influencing each other in
I
maybe
think
good
so.
ways.
Maybe.
We did a text exchange yesterday and I told her I was getting ready to go kill somebody. And she was like, awesome.
I
Don't
was
wanna
so
stop
proud
me
of
from
you. I was so proud. So I'm next time my husband gets home and I'm going to greet him with a welcome home kiss. I'm going to text you and say I'm getting about ready to kiss somebody. And then you can do that. I'm going to kill
Yes.
somebody texts and I'll do that. I'm going to kiss somebody. That's just weird.
That's right.
I'm done. That's weird. That's just weird. All right. Well, everybody, thank you for joining us with this episode of Smooches and Stabs with Pepper Basham and Jamie Jo Wright. Go out and pick up a copy of Mistletoe Countess by Pepper Basham and dive into the mystery of the Black Dahlia if you dare.